I'd like to talk about Starbucks and their cafe practices. They're currently a coffee shop you may have heard of. They currently have 16,000 stores in 62 countries. They make 4 million cups of coffee a day, and they just so happen to want to try and make this sourcing process better for the farmer. In doing so, they've developed coffee and farmer equity practices, which are known today but formerly known as the Preferred Supplier Program, initiated in part by rising consumer demand for ethical products and a partnership with Conservation International. The current model was developed with input from the African Wildlife Foundation and the scientific certification systems, and it currently represents 86% of the ethical coffee purchases that Starbucks makes. In 2015, they hope to be sourcing 100% of their coffee ethically. This is either through CAFE practices, fair trade, or organic means, with the majority of it hopefully sourced through CAFE practices. Sourcing for Starbucks is managed by the Starbucks Coffee Trading Company based in Switzerland. It takes ownership of developing and maintaining relationships with suppliers, as well as providing educational resources on coffee. They established this company in order to control the sourcing methods through the coffee farmers and suppliers that they deal with. So suppliers can range from small-scale farmers to estates to cooperatives who, if they're fortunate, have access to select regional farmer support centers that Starbucks sets up in Costa Rica, Rwanda, and China. The SCTC oversees these centers and, according to Starbucks, helps farmers in areas of quality standards, knowledge, sharing for best sustainable agricultural practices, and the administration of the CAFE practices to increase yield and productivity. Creating standards for sourcing, education, and development, Starbucks projects onto the entire industry mentality almost of father knows best. So it's actually creating an educational standard that it's telling farmers is the best way to produce it in order to join the programs. It does this in order farmers want to actually be a part of this program because of the reputation that Starbucks has for buying and commitment that they have to purchasing once they've agreed to it. The certification process is designed as a generic scorecard system. It focuses on 3 key pillars, including economic transparency and accountability, social responsibility, which incorporates employment standards, and environmental leadership efforts divided into the areas of coffee growing and processing. The scorecard consists of 181 individual indicators, of which 15 are zero tolerance indicators. From the application for certification, the SCS inspector generates a sample of farms from a supplier and typically represents large, medium, and small-scale entities. So, for example, if a supplier controls or represents 2,415 entities and they're all comprised of different levels, the SCS inspector will verify 100% of the large-scale farms and only 0.075% of medium farms and 0.2% of small-scale farms. In this context, the farms that are applying for first-time certification are always evaluated, and farms renewing their status with Starbucks are selected at random. Farms can have a score of less than 60%, according to CAFE practices, but still be considered a verified supplier. They commit to make improvements for the next round and accumulate points and more money in terms of how many they get. The tiered system includes premiums for scores above 60, noted as preferred suppliers, and increasing to over 80% are called strategic suppliers. It raises a question of long-term impacts for farmers should they choose to apply for the certification. It is not a yes or no, but good enough for now system. Starbucks stresses that farmers do not have to pay fees to be certified and that the program is designed to act as an incentivized package promoting a gradual compliance of the farm, which they can manage over time, according to Starbucks, earning the farmer higher premiums for points accumulated. Yet are the farmers that consumers believe they're helping able to afford the changes needed to become a preferred supplier? Despite the lack of certification fees, many of the requirements within the scorecard still remain costly for small-scale farmers to implement without access to credit. In addition, the funds required to pay for travel expenses for the inspector are covered by the farmer, decreasing the incentive to comply. As the contracts for the program are on a one-year basis, this makes loans at reasonable rates inaccessible to small-scale farmers as well. As an example, the act of building a school is done at a farmer's own cost and earns them extra points just for its mere existence on the farm. Yet it may not yield any benefits socially to the workers of an estate, as it would still require a government-approved teacher, usually a woman, who is willing to come to the farm and live there alone. Though the idea behind the social indicator stresses implementing such mechanisms on the farm, indicators these currently lack the ability to be considered impactful to the farmer and the community in the long term. Equity is emphasized by Starbucks as a concept of providing fairness to farmers, yet is completely managed from a corporate standpoint. Larger corporation purchases of Nestle, Kraft, Procter & Gamble, and Zanetti Coffee Group add up to more than 60% of the coffee traded and are utilized the large supply of robust or lower quality beans to control the price of coffee on the market. Though Starbucks buys less than 4% of the world's coffee, their ability and commitment to purchasing higher quality beans provides a market demand on a large scale compared to independent shops to purchase higher quality beans from small-scale farmers. Starbucks does 30% of its business directly with growers, leading all major coffee buyers, and through C.A.F.E practices has perfectly positioned itself for its own demand as a certifier and a buyer. The internally derived system that operates without the regulatory efforts of governments provides a direct trade relationships with farmers and instills trust, allowing C.A.F.E practices to act more of a corporate development tool than a certification. Historically, Starbucks has not actively sought out independent ways in which to help farmers, but C.A.F.E practices demonstrates the ability to reform existing standards to suit its bottom line profits, as well as keep trend with the current social, economic, and environmental preferences. Farmers have conceded that they can earn more per pound on average from fair trade and organic certification schemes, yet the size of Starbucks allows for its position as a preferential buyer by ensuring that they purchase all of the coffee, something that other certification bodies cannot guarantee. At the heart of Starbucks, in marketing as well as their espresso shots, is the notion of quality coffee, which it places increasingly high importance on within their C.A.F.E practices and their stores. Fewer than half the coffee samples that are received by Starbucks are accepted, and those that are go through at least 5 quality standard tests before ending up in a consumer's cup. In addition to a sample that a supplier must submit, they must also include financial documentation of wages paid to farmers, and quality is a benchmark for the C.A.F.E practices. It is increasingly noted throughout all of Starbucks marketing, training, and consumer materials. The impact of their purchasing behaviors based on their size, the standards they set up and uphold to their suppliers, has the ability to shape the specialty coffee industry. Ironically, it is not the high-quality black brewed coffee that millions of consumers are purchasing each day. The most common drink ordered at Starbucks is a skinny vanilla latte, which hides its coffee with an overwhelming amount of milk and syrup, non-fat and sugar-free, neither of which are beneficial to the consumer or the farmer. Even in a basic cappuccino, the cost breakdown reports that only 5% of the price of a $4 cappuccino is the price of the coffee itself. This comes up to less than the price of the cup, the sleeve, and the lid combined. This raises the question of whether higher premiums cannot be given to farmers committed to quality efforts as designed by Starbucks C.A.F.E practices, as the price for consumers would not need to increase, or whether the entire notion of quality is necessary or worth the efforts. To be resolved, it is the level of impact Starbucks is able to have through its C.A.F.E practices to help small-scale farmers not only obtain but retain higher prices for their efforts, in addition to developing sustainable standards socially, economically, and environmentally. That was probably really fast, and that's everything.